Welcome to this podcast, Holistc Creators, where we share our unique and universal stories about shaping the future for the 4 Ps: people, planet, purpose, and profit. My name is Swanette Kuntze. I'm a mental coach and your host of this show. My intention for this show is to inspire you on your path to a holistic future. So welcome. Hello and welcome to my podcast, Holistc Creators. My name is Swanette and I'm your host. Today my guest is Eesha Patel. She is a Galactic Consciousness Expert. Welcome to my show.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really excited for today's conversation. I can't imagine you have a lot of galactic experts on your show. So I'd love to get into that and maybe explain to people what that even is.
Absolutely. So this is very unique and I'm super curious about this conversation as well, because you are connected to the higher beings, to the galactic, and no, I haven't heard about anybody who is doing that. So let us understand a little bit, what is this all about and how does it start that you can connect with these kind of beings?
Yeah, that's a really great question. If you had asked me 10 years ago that, that I'd be doing this sort of work and that I'd be, all up in the galactic side of things, I would have said you're absolutely crazy, because 10 years ago, I didn't even know what it was. And so what happened for me actually in 2015 was I went through a really big spiritual awakening experience, and I was meditating quite regularly on a daily basis. And I think that was one of the things that made me more open in my mind and in my consciousness. So it was as a result of meditation practices and also through some things that were happening in my life at that point in time that created this perfect avenue or this environment for this spiritual awakening to happen. And as a result of that is when I started connecting with these galactic beings. So the first group that came through from the galactic side was the Arcturians. And they said, we are actually, first they said we're the Council of Light. And I said, well, council, what council, what light, like from where, like who is this? So I had a lot of questions around it, as you can imagine, for someone who's quite new. I hadn't studied this. I didn't have a teacher to teach me all of this. I kind of just came into a lot of this myself. So when they said we're the Council of Light, over time I started meditating, connecting with them, and then they showed themselves to me as these blue beings, and then I heard Arcturian. So that's how I knew that it was then the Arcturian Council of Light. And one of the first things they gave to me was this series of sacred geometry codes. And I was told, take these images, go share them with people, and that these will activate people's DNA. That's as far as I got. So I knew that they were DNA activation codes. I didn't know how they worked. I didn't know what the mechanism was behind it. I didn't know the science behind it, none of that. But I did. I shared it. I followed the guidance. I took the advice from these Arcturian beings, and I shared these codes with a group of people. And my very, very first event, there were 3 people in the room who were meditating, and we collectively saw this Arcturian starship, this blue starship coming, and we all described it identically as blue, triangular, with a beam of light coming down. And so that was one of my very, very first experiences of facilitation, which happened within just 5 weeks of me receiving the download. So I went from not knowing anything about it, having the connection, to facilitating an event in about 5 weeks' time. It's a bit of a crazy journey when you look back on it now.
Yeah, wow, what a starting point. And also like being super brave. I can imagine like when you first feel that there's something showing up, and I'm curious how this shows up for you, that you are not afraid of like, okay, there's something that is like not really in this dimension, because I imagine that you can't see them like us, like 3D people. It must be somehow different, and that you are not afraid of what is showing up there. So let us know a little bit about that. How do you see them, sense them, feel them? You said you can see something, but yeah, how did they show up, and what made you curious and not anxious about that?
That's a very interesting question. And I've asked myself this many times as well. Like, why wasn't I scared of them? But I think they just came through with such a loving energy that it was hard to feel fear. I think I think also I have a level of openness to the spiritual and the paranormal because even when I was younger, I used to have not like galactic connections, but just very odd supernatural stuff would be going on. So I saw ghosts when I was a kid. I had really strange experiences in the house where things would be moving around, lights would be going on and off. So I wasn't new to the supernatural. So even though the galactic side of things was definitely very new for me, I had no idea about that side of it. I think I wasn't scared because I had seen strange stuff before. So I think in my childhood, it's almost like I've been set up with some sort of background, so that when it eventually did happen, instead of freaking out about it, I mean, it was definitely strange. It was a bit, some elements of it were definitely a bit strange and scary, but overall, I was able to receive the connection because I was open to things that were paranormal or supernatural. And also because I had this meditation practice that I've been doing for a couple of years at that point. And in that meditation, I had some connections with angelic guides or spirit guides in that sense as well. So when the galactic beings started coming through, I kind of put it in that same sort of category. I just thought, oh, they must be like, spirit guides or something like that. So I think it made me a bit more calm towards this idea that there are galactic beings out there.
Hmm. And how do you sense them?
So I sense them mostly telepathically, although as my skills have developed over the years, I do get physical sightings quite a lot now as well. So I might go outside and I'll see flashes of light. They'll tell me to go out, and then as soon as I go out, I'll get flashes of light. Sometimes I'll get photographs of certain ships that go past as well. So I have a few photos of Polaran ships. I had one in Serbia that actually got a formal write-up done up by the UFO Birmingham group. So I've had a couple of very solid photographs as well that are very like evidence-based. But for me, a lot of it is it's energetic, it's telepathic. I can sense their presence. I know in the earlier days, it used to be very tangible in the sense that I would just get a headache every time there was a starship above. So I would just know, I would go into a space and I would just go, okay, I can feel it. And then they would start sending me colors of their energy. So for example, there was one starship. I remember I was on my way up to the Perth Hills, and the Perth Hills here, they're very, very high in activity. There's just so much going on, especially around Darlington and further out to Kalamunda. So when I was there, I remember driving on the way there and feeling that there was a starship above me. It was kind of tracking over my car, as I was driving. And then I kept getting these colors like flashes of magenta and violet and just kind of like oscillating in those frequencies. And then orange flashes would come through. And then by the time I got there, I realized it was a specific group of beings that were trying to make themselves known to me. So sometimes they come through as colors, sometimes they will give me a name. So for example, like there was one being, this is again, we're going back to sort of 2015, 2016. His name is Arnott. And I was sitting on the beach. I knew that there was a seventh dimensional starship there. I was just chilling out, and then started having this conversation with him, telepathically. And then he just said that his name is Arnott. And then it was quite interesting with this experience because until then, I'd not really had any verification on, am I making this up? Is it just, me, whatever. So anyway, fast forward about a year or so, and there was a lady that I met. She lived up in the Perth Hills, and she was also very connected to these energies. And one day we were just chatting, and she said the word Arnott as in reference to one of the beings. And I was like, what did you just say? I mean, it's not a common name. It's not like Michael or Sam or Bob, It's like it's a very uncommon, unusual sort of name. And so when she said Anna, and then she said that he's on board a seventh dimensional starship called the Eehsa, I was like, oh my God, I connected with the same being like a year before. So I've had those sorts of experiences where I've had the connections telepathically. I've been shown visuals in my third eye as well. I've seen color frequencies coming through. And then I've also had them verified with other people who've connected with the same beings as well. And so that's been a very expansive experience to realize that this is not just me in my head making stuff up. There's actually something to this.
And knew from the first moment on that they were coming with a good intention, as you said.
Yeah. I've never had any fear. I've never had anything to suggest that they might be like negative. Mind you, I mean, because I've done years and years of meditation and traveling around the realms, and there are beings out there who don't have the best agendas. I have come across lower vibrational beings. I have met greys, I've met reptilians, I've met all sorts of different beings. But these ones that were coming through, I've just always felt love. I mean, they come through with the most pure, loving intention. And I mean, I can feel their presence, I can feel it. And one of the tools that I learned quite early on was the tool of discernment, because I think everyone should have discernment traversing these realms. I mean, it would be naive to say that every being out there is benevolent. The same as here on planet Earth, like overall, like you get some really great humans, people are loving and kind and charitable and all these wonderful things. And then you get some beings who are just downright not, So I think you really have to be a bit discerning. The same way you'd be discerning with people, you'd be discerning with these beings. And so one of the things that I do, if I'm ever unsure of their intentions, I just send love from my heart to their heart. And in those realms, because it's all frequency based, if they have a loving intention and a loving pure frequency, when I send love from my heart towards them, they will come towards me and reveal themselves. But if it is a being, and this has happened on a small handful of occasions, where if the being is not high vibrational, or on one time I actually had a being that was pretending to be another being. It was pretending to be Archangel Michael. So you got to watch out for that. And then I sent love 3 times from my heart to his. I said, reveal yourself. And it turns out it was a reptilian. So you got to be careful sometimes, you have to really be mindful of your frequency. And then Archangel Michael actually came in and said, this is what I feel like, just to like reassure me. And he came straight up to me, heart to heart, third eye to third eye. So I knew straight away it's him. But the other being, soon as I sent love, he just kind of stayed there, which I thought was strange. He didn't come any closer, but he didn't back away. And then there's some weird universal rule. I don't know why it works, but when you ask 3 times, they have to reveal themselves. So on the third time, there it was, completely shape-shifted. And that's when I realized, okay, I have to be very mindful of frequency. That kind of thing doesn't happen very often. Most of the time, I do just connect with light beings. But it was a great exercise in discernment for me to know that there are lots of different beings out there, and it's important to know who you're connecting with, what energy it is, and if you're ever unsure, just start with love. Start with love in your heart, connect out with that intention, and the loving beings will always be drawn to that. Whereas any energies that are not of the light, they will be repelled by that frequency, because that's just law of vibration.
Yeah, so for me, I'm also very sensitive. I'm clairvoyant and precognitive since I'm 8 years old, and I had a near-death experience. So I really can sense other beings. I'm connected to the Pleiadians. So for me, they are the ones that I sense very much, and no, I have the communication with. But sometimes it happens that what you said, no, another being shows up here, and I get goosebumps. So as soon as like I feel my body is kind of rejecting this being, and often they are also covered. Like when I ask them for the true identity, I can already sense that they try to cover something. Like you said, no, you feel if you send love 3 times, there is like no, this rejection, and they are not opening up. And for me, it's kind of the same, but more with other senses. I think it's like more my body is in totally reacting on that. So it's kind of strange that they still try to come in, even though we can see that they are behind a mask, and that they try to cover themselves with who they are not, and like show up with somehow a strange intention, because otherwise they wouldn't need to. If they have a direct conversation with us, I think it would be different than like not trusting them because they were like behind this cover, or like in another shape. For example, you said no, they were shape shifting to Archangel Angel Michael.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the connection, it does evolve for people over the years as well. A lot of people start just with sensing collective energies. They might sense that it's a group of Pleiadians or a group of Arcturians. And then as you get more refined in your energy, it gets very specific. Like I know exactly the name of the Arcturian or the name of the Pleiadian being that I'm connecting with. And again, it's refinement, you know, it's like the more you connect, the more you've refined you get. And then when you know their individual energies, it's very easy to tell that it's them. I have this sort of I don't know, a bit of a running joke thing. There's so many shades of blue in the galactic space, right? Because the Pleiadians are blue, the Arcturians are blue, Ashtar Command and his fleet are blue. There's so many blue energies. And yet at the same time, if you try to, you know, draw or color all the blue energies or paint them, they would look almost identical. And yet the feeling of each one, each blue energy, I find is so distinct that I can tell straight away, yep, this is the blue of Archangel Michael, or this is the blue of Ashtar, this is the blue of Ashura, this is the blue of a Arcturian elder, this is the blue of Mira from the Pleiades. It's very, very clear cut. But I think it's taken years and years of meditation to get to that point where there's that much clarity and refinement where it's just clear as daylight.
Was it clear from the first moment on when you got this geometries that there was a purpose behind, or was it just at the beginning, oh, I got this science and now, okay, this is nice information, but it was not clear that you have to do something with that? Or what you have
it was clear from pretty much day one that like I received the codes and they said share the codes. You know, I mean, I received them within a matter of days. So if we go through the timeline of how it happened, it was like I had my first channeling experience and then within a few days got the first code. And then by less than a week later, I had all of the codes. And then another month after that, I was sharing the codes after having done them up on, you know, I'm not much of a graphic designer. I just got on Microsoft Word and I sort of just like did it myself, you know, and then I printed them out. I just put them on like a bit of card and then I got people to meditate on them and they told me straight away that these were going to be DNA activation. So that part I knew that they were to be shared and I knew that they were going to have some healing or activation sort of capabilities. So that part came through pretty quickly. But I mean, that really was just the beginning because I think one of the things they were also doing was at that point, they were testing to see how well I was listening. And this is the thing, a lot of people receive these missions and they don't act on them, right? It could be like one time they asked me to go to a suburb called Jarrahdale and they asked me to go to a very specific property and do a mission there. And I've been getting this kind of message for about a week or so. And then one day I was like, right, I'm getting my car and I'm going. And this property was actually a private property. I knew the person who was there, but it was a private property. And so I literally messaged this person, said, hey, I feel like I need to come over and I'm coming now. I mean, who does that, you know? I didn't even know the guy that well. Like I met him. I mean, I knew him, but we weren't like, you know, really like good friends that I could just rock up anytime at his place, you know? But I think they were testing to see how well and how quickly I would be able to listen, because then when those couple of things happened, after I did that first event and after I did this first little mini planetary mission, then the mission started to get more complex. Then they would say to me, for example, fly across the world. Like, for example, in 2015, they said, go to Mount Shasta. I mean, that's in America. I'm in Australia, you know, that's not something you just decide on the fly. But yeah, I pretty much booked the tickets, went to Mount Shasta. And when I was there, again, I was just listening to the guidance the whole time. And it was actually, they said to me, go on September 11, 2015, very significant date. It was working with the 9/11 frequencies. I found out the theory behind that a bit later on down the track, but they asked me to go there on 9/11. And what actually happened was that morning I woke up and I was about to go up the mountain and it just said, oh, just wait, just wait, just wait. So I'm just listening, following the guidance. I'm wandering around the town. I remember stopping for lunch at the little cafe there. I'm just, you know, doing whatever. And then suddenly I get this message, okay, go now. So then I get in my car, I go up the mountain, and that was my first visit to the mountain on that particular trip. And as soon as I got there, I saw this gentleman there. He was kneeling over by the river and he had a bag of crystals. And so I just walked up to him. I said, hey, what are you doing, you know? And his name is Marlo, and he probably won't mind me naming him, but it's so funny. So a couple of years, or maybe like, I think, yeah, 2 or 3 years before that, I had met a lady from America who was a quantum hypnosis regression facilitator. And so I had a QHHC session. It's Dolores Cannon's work. You may be familiar with it. So I had one of those quantum hypnosis regressions with her. And then I didn't see her again for a long time. Then I go up the mountain. I started chatting with this gentleman and I said, oh, hey, like, what are you doing? Just, sort of struck up a conversation. And first thing within the first minute, he says, well, I'm a quantum hypnosis facilitator. So of course I said, well, do you know this lady, Honey Borden? And he was like, yeah, we train together. We're really good friends. Like, and the odds of me going to America in California on Mount Shasta, talking to the first person there, he happens to know the only other person pretty much except my auntie that I know in America who I met when she was in Perth. The chances of that happening are less than 1 in a million, So that happened within the first few minutes. And you have to remember that I was following the guidance. So went up at the exact time. Had I been there a minute earlier or a minute later, he wouldn't have been there. So that synchronicity was too much. Now, we then got into a conversation and he said to me, oh, actually, I've flown here from Washington, D.C. Sorry, not from Washington. Honey used to live in Washington and he lived in Miami. So he'd come over from Miami to be in California, which is across the country, right? And he was there because there was a gentleman called Ricardo Gonzalez. He's a UFO researcher and expert, happened to be running a conference the next day on the mountain. So I just chatted with this guy for 5 minutes. He gave me all the information. Then he said, I'll send you the info and stuff, but he never really sent it to me. My phone wasn't working. I didn't have reception and whatever. But I had the guy's name. And so I just Googled Ricardo Gonzalez UFO conference, Sand Flat, Mount Shasta, September 12th, So I just Googled all of that, found the event, and then just rocked up there the next morning. And there I was, So that's how I ended up at a UFO conference in Mount Shasta by being guided to go to the mountain on September 11, talk to this guy and end up at this thing, which I never would have found out about. And also, even if I had found out about it, I never would have gone. You know why? Because the whole event was in Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. So it was all these little synchronicities, being guided from star family, listening to the guidance that got me on the mountain to have this contact experience. Now, I didn't personally experience anything that night, but years later, when I look back on it, how things kind of in hindsight, you realize, oh, those energies were present and things were there. So it was very unconscious for me at that time. But there were people there on that particular evening who said that they met with a being called Antaral, and there's a whole story behind that. Can't verify it, wasn't there, didn't see it, but just the fact that I was there in the presence and the way that it all unfolded, I think that gave me a lot of confirmation around the messages I was receiving, and also just this sense of that there's something to it, that you're not going crazy, Eesha, there's a legitimate guidance that was coming through and guiding me into having these very, very synchronistic kind of experiences.
Yeah. Wow. This is super amazing. And yeah, I can only imagine if you really let them lead you and you think, okay, what am I doing here? I'm waiting here and now I meet this guy and be on the conference. And after that, it totally makes sense. But at the beginning, it's kind of, are you really kidding me? I have to fly over from one side of the earth to the other for what? Yeah. And they didn't tell you what is going to happen. So it was like,
No, that's it. Yeah, and they never do, I'll be honest with you. If you want if you want to do this spiritual work, you can't do this expecting to know every single thing. There is a level of just jump and the net will appear. It takes a lot of trust, a lot of courage to just follow the guidance. But I've learned that there's a reason for that. Some of us that are doing these very high levels of planetary work, the thing is, timelines are changing so quickly that we have to be malleable. And I've had many, many trips since then. Like, for example, I went to the UK a few years ago. I did a 3-week trip there, and they just said to me, get on a plane, go to Dublin, and we'll tell you the rest when you get there. So I didn't have any accommodation booked in. I had some loose plans along the way. A couple of things were kind of in place, but everything else was on the fly. And the reason for that, they told me, was because thing is, if I have plans in my head, everything's out in the consciousness, right? Because the mission required a level of discretion. I'm sounding almost Star Trek-y now, like it's very like CIA, secret agent, sort of stuff. But the mission required discretion and it needed to be kept secret. And the easiest way to keep it secret is if it's not even in my thoughts. Because if my plans are in my thoughts can go out into the atmosphere. I do have techniques on how to block that, but when I was younger, I didn't have that. So thoughts were accessible by not only the beings that were giving me the guidance, but the beings who could stop my plans, you know? And so they said to me, just trust us. We're going to tell you in the moment where you need to go, what you need to do. And just if you're listening in the moment, you'll be very, very guided. And exactly, it worked out so perfectly. I got off the airport, off the plane at the Dublin airport. And then I just said, guys, what do I do now? And they literally said to me, go here, get this bus, get off at this stop, walk this way, turn here, turn there, look up. And I came across a hotel. It was called the North Star Hotel, which is connected to the Polaris constellation. And the rest of that trip had a lot of bear imageries, and there's a whole story behind that. But again, it's about the listening in the moment. If I had to know every step along the way, I never would have started the mission. And they can't do that. You can't do that. You have to be, it's almost like this undercover secret spy kind of vibe where you have to be listening because A, things can change, and B, you can't have certain things in your thoughts until the perfect moment and the perfect time unless you have a very high level of mental discipline and have the capacity to block this stuff out from the beings that shouldn't be listening in.
Yeah, and also if you receive information before, it could happen that you create your own construct around it. Yeah, so
Yes.
we still
Exactly.
are living in
Yeah.
this reality, and we have our kind of past where we can make constructs out of information, and they are not really true. Yeah, so I think
Exactly. Yeah. I think
yeah.
that's a really, really important point as well, because we do have this tendency, our human minds have this tendency to create stories around stuff. So if the whole thing had been planned ahead of time, I would have potentially limited the scope of the mission because that mission had so many threads throughout the whole thing. And it's because I was listening in the moment, being so intuitively guided that I was able to catch all of those threads in the moment. But if I had planned every step of it before I went, then my mission would have been like maybe only this big instead of this big, like a percentage would have made sense to me because a lot of it didn't make sense to me. That's the other thing as well. Some of it didn't make sense to me until months after I got back. Like I would just get guided to go to a particular spot and then months later it would connect in with another piece of information. And I go, oh, that's why I had to do that back when I was in that spot, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, you said also a little bit ago on this interview that you thought perhaps no, I'm going crazy, like no, I really have to somehow validate what is coming through. And for me, it was kind of the same because no, getting information and channeling beings at the beginning, you think, that do I make this all up in my mind, or is this really like what is coming through? And I participated in some remote viewing studies.
Oh,
And there,
nice.
yeah, so yeah, as you said, the tools of the CIA. So this, for people who don't know, this was one of the tools the CIA used for spying on the Russian people during the Cold War. But
Yeah.
it is also very useful to find people, for example. And so for me, it was very clear participating in these studies that I'm now kind of certified woo-woo. I know what I'm doing. And
Yeah.
I think listening to other people who verify what you're seeing is kind of the proof for yourself as well.
Yeah. Who did you train with the remote viewing? I mean, there's a few courses out there.
I think there was a mixture of different people I followed. I read books about that and I saw different videos. So it was not that I'm following one guy to
Right,
learn
right.
that. Yeah, it's the same with reading the Akashic records. There have been different people that I trained with, and just to figure out that there are different ways to enter the Akashic records. And somehow I made up my own thing out of that. So there is not like one way to do that. I think, and this is also for other people, no? You have to figure out what is the best way for you to connect. So
Yeah, yeah,
as you said, you were also just no listening, you were listening to the Acturians and no, were very connected to them, and by that you learned. Yeah, and of course, perhaps you had also like the regression into in past lives. As you said, you met this lady.
yeah. I did that quantum session. That was like sort of pre-awakening. That particular session, I do recall having like a bit of a healing and activation during that, like preparing my chakras, and but the awakening I think was 1 or 2 years after that. So, but I mean everything kind of goes together, right? Because there was a point where I did do some mentoring with someone, and she taught me how to activate my Merkaba light body. And this was in my early 20s, you know, I must have been sort of 21 when I met her. And then I learned this technique of how to activate my Merkaba light body. And I used to do that pretty much every day. And there was this one moment, probably about 18 months into this practice, where I remember just sitting and suddenly it was like I actually entered that 13th dimension, or that space where everything is one and nothing at the same time. And it was so blissful. Like my body, it was like my body was there, but it wasn't. And suddenly I was connected with everything in the universe, and this sort of connectedness, this oneness. Like I felt that, you know. And I've had some similar moments since then. But for me, back then in my early 20s, I mean, that was really profound. And I remember going online, I went on Google and, you know, just was typing in what is the 13th dimension? And, you know, of course, there wasn't really anything there. So that was kind of the point where I thought, you know what, I feel like I've reached this level in my consciousness where I'm going to have to do the rest by myself. So a lot of my stuff was self-taught. Of course, I had some guides and teachers and books and things along the way as and when I was ready, things would appear to me. But a lot of my stuff was very, very self-taught, and just, I felt like I kind of had to jump, like dive into the deep end a little, because when I did have this awakening in 2015, even though I had this meditation practice, I didn't know anything about channeling. I didn't know anything about galactic guides, didn't know anything about DNA activations. I wasn't a healer. I hadn't done Reiki, nothing, you know? So I was really coming in with very little experience. And when I started experiencing these sort of realities, I remember like one time I was just walking along the foreshore here in Western Australia, and suddenly this overlay of ancient Lemuria just came in front of me. And I remember the first thing I sort of thought to myself was, why are the trees so small nowadays? Because when I think back to Lemuria, like everything was really big. I'm like, where is that energy going? Why aren't things thriving the way they used to be? Um, and even feeling this sadness for that, you know, like all the animals are smaller, all the trees are smaller, everything's really small. Like what happened to this grand Eden, you know, this Lemuria that we had? It's just not there anymore. And so I remember having those sorts of experiences as well, where these downloads would just come to me, and I'd just be walking. I wouldn't even be meditating, I'd be walking down the street, suddenly seeing these things and having these conversations with beings at the beach, or like one time I connected with a tree spirit, and that was something I didn't know I could do. I went for a walk again, felt guided. I sat next to this tree, and then I hear this voice that said, you can take this sap. And so I looked behind me. It was one of these Australian grass trees, and it had this red sap coming out of it. And I took a little bit, like very fresh. It was still quite sticky. So I just pulled it off, and I felt like the tree was gifting it to me. Well, I mean, the tree spirit said, here's a gift for you. So I took it. And then I went home, and then I thought, geez, I don't want to like drink it and die. You know, like I don't know what this stuff is. So I messaged a friend of mine who's sort of in tune with like indigenous herbs and all that. And I said, hey, you know, I spoke to this tree spirit, and the tree said to take the sap, put it in a liquid and drink it. I just want to check I'm not going to die if I do that. And she was like, no, don't worry. That's what the indigenous people do. And at that point, I sort of realized that I had some of these past life indigenous connections as well. And there's a reason why I was born in India, but live in Australia. So a lot of that information came through as well. But again, it was just the listening, and there were moments in that where I thought, oh geez, this is a bit crazy. I'm talking to a tree, you know. But then I verified it. It's not that crazy now. It's like totally normal. But having that verification with those friends in those earlier stages was very helpful, just for me to learn to trust the guidance. And I think that is so huge for people. Anyone who's just starting to awaken, you know, having someone that you can talk to, having a community where this stuff is okay. Like if I just gone and told some of my engineering friends, I have a bachelor's in engineering. If I told this to some of them, they would have just said that's crazy, you know, because they're very like scientific. But luckily I had the right people in my network around me, and I could ask and trust those specific people. And for them, it's not that crazy. So that's how I was able to get that validation and not feel so scared with it, because I realized, firstly, I wasn't the only one. Secondly, I had that community around me, which is so invaluable. And also just having the verification that the messages I'm getting are authentic to Indigenous knowledge or things that other people have experienced as well.
Mm. Yeah, and I think it is not really strange, even sometimes for scientists. No? If you look into the quantum physics, now we
Yeah.
are starting to understand what we from the spiritual side can see, and know what also from like the science side is validated now. And I'm
Mm.
an engineer as well, so I have both sides in
Oh,
me,
right.
and
Beautiful. Yeah.
so I can understand. I think both. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love quantum physics. I love watching videos. Actually, just today I was looking at a channel. She's a young girl. She does some stuff with she was doing a video on the double slit experiment. Now, I learned this way back in school, like when I did physics, like physics 101, you know. We learned about the double slit experiment, but the way that she went into it, I just thought, man, like science is getting so much closer to working out this truth. And I think the esoteric and the science really, they go so hand in hand. You know, like science is the proof of what the esoteric already knows. And I think now it's starting to really come together, because you can have particles that are miles and miles apart. You interact with one of them and the other one responds. Well, how do you explain that? Well, there must be some consciousness that links them together.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I'm also curious, you said you're connected with different beings and from different stars or different galaxies. So do they come with different tasks for you, or why are they connected with you? So what is behind?
Sometimes they are mission based, the connections. Other times they're also just revelations of my soul frequencies. So, for example, on this UK trip that I mentioned earlier, I went to Glastonbury as part of that trip. And as I was walking up to the tour, there's a big tower there in Glastonbury, very, very spiritual place. And as I was walking up there, it comes through in such strange ways sometimes. There was this song that started playing on my Spotify, which I'd had my headphones in. I was walking up, you know, just having gone for a little walk, and I'd never heard this song before. I had never played before. I don't know how it came on my Spotify, mystery, you know, but it just suddenly started playing, and the song was called Anahera, and something in me said, like, pay attention to this. There's something significant. Now, obviously, there was the magic of the land itself, like Glastonbury in itself, just being there is magical, you know? And what happened for me during that walk was I suddenly started to feel this angelic presence around me. And so I started to get a sense that, okay, I think this is one of my soul aspects. And we have many soul aspects. We're multidimensional beings, have soul aspects in many star races, many different dimensions. A lot of people just say, oh, I'm Arcturian or I'm Pleiadian. I'm like, no, no, you actually have so many. And they will come through in the time that they need to come through. So this angelic frequency came through in that very specific moment, partly because it was an anchoring that was happening in that location. So the sacred sites can play quite a big role in that. And secondly, because so when I searched for the meaning of Anahera in Maori, it actually means angel. So I was having this experience where the song came on, I tuned into the energy and I felt my angelic self come through. And for me, that was the awareness or the revelation that, oh, this is an aspect of me. And so as I continued throughout the rest of that UK trip, doing so many missions in so many locations, that angelic presence was with me. And so it came through in that specific time for that specific purpose. Now, of course, once these you know, connections come through, they tend to stay. Like now I know, okay, I have these Lyran connections, I have Arcturian connections, Pleiadian connections. I've got my 5D self Lily, I've got this angelic self Anahera, and they just come through in their various moments as and when is needed. This Anahera connection, this angelic connection, actually, I have a really, really powerful story with. So one morning I was meditating, and this was something I did every morning. So I was just meditating, and instead of getting up that morning around 8 o'clock like I normally would, I just felt like, no, just stay in there a little bit longer. And so I stayed in the meditation a little bit longer than usual, maybe an extra 15, 20 minutes. And I had this very powerful vision. I saw myself suddenly, I was in a car and this car was just going through, there was a set of lights and then there was another car coming in this direction from the right and it was about to T-bone the car that I was in. And I just, my gut like completely like tensed up. Like it was a very visceral, physical, like scary experience, this one. And then suddenly there was this big like whoosh, and then the car suddenly just stopped out of nowhere, and this other car went speeding past. And and then I came out of the meditation like sort of 5 minutes later. I was like, whoa, like what just happened? And I felt my angelic energy there. Now, I got to work that morning. This was back when I had my studio. So I got ready for work. I got my car. I got to my studio, opened the door, sat down, opened my emails like I do first thing every morning. And I had this email from a friend of mine, and the title of the email was Saved by Angels. And she described the exact scenario. She was in the car was coming, about to T-bone her, and her car suddenly, magically went into neutral and just came to a stop, and that car missed her car. And I just had goosebumps because I realized in that moment, I was anchoring in the 3D through my angelic self, ninth dimensional self, Anahera. I was anchoring through meditation in the physical for that experience to happen. Because in order for that angelic being to actually physically manipulate that gear from drive into neutral, they need a physical anchor point, right? So in that moment, I became the anchor point for the angelic energy to come through to then save that girl's life, and crazy, right? Crazy. Like, yeah, so sometimes these connections come in with very specific purposes, very specific moments. And in that instance, yeah, we actually saved her life. Like she would have been completely T-boned. I mean, that car was not only speeding, but it ran a red light. So that was a disaster waiting to happen, At the very least, she would have ended up in hospital, very severely injured. But yeah, if her experience of it was the car, it just suddenly her gear just went from drive into neutral, just like I'd felt it. It was like this whoosh, and the car suddenly came to a stop, and then everything was okay.
Mm-hmm.
Powerful,
Well,
right?
yeah, this is extraordinary, no question about that. So,
Yeah.
we can see that like these beings are supportive and you are like the channel or the medium to bring it to this reality.
Well,
And
this is the convergence. A lot of people ask, well, how, well, firstly, a lot of people ask, why should I even connect? And I'm like, well, there's so many reasons. Like, I mean, as if saving somebody's life isn't enough. But I mean, that's not why we do it. Like for me, it's about being in that service and knowing that when I am anchored into these frequencies that I can have this connection and with this guidance. I mean, really it is for me, it's about raising the vibration of the planet so that everyone can learn that we are these multidimensional beings. That's what it comes down to me for. It's that we are multidimensional beings and we don't have to have the suffering. Like why would that girl go through months and months of suffering in hospital or even leave the planet when she has this long life to live? And so what happens is the angelic beings come in and they can support and they can guide. And when we are connected to these energies, we can heal, we can help people, we can like some of my work has been around abundance as well, even just helping people clear blockages and really step into the life that they're meant to live, because this planet, this is the Garden of Eden, this is the paradise. Earth is a paradise. We've come here to be physical. We're not here to go be spiritual. We are spiritual anyway. We are spiritual beings. That is our fundamental nature. But we are here to be in this physical experience, in this incarnation. And yet what's happened is there's been this fall in vibration, and there's a lot more suffering. There's anger, there's poverty, there's hatred, and so we have the option now as a human race to reconnect with these multidimensional aspects of ourselves, to learn about the bliss and the joy of just being alive, to then just have a great life here on earth. And I think that's what it comes down to for me.
I would like to change a little bit now to the business side, because if you have these amazing gifts, I'm sure you are helping people with that. And I would like to understand a little bit who is coming to you? And you already said abundance would be a topic. What are typical topics people come to you, and how can you help them?
Well, I've gone through quite a bit of a journey with the layers of work that I've done. I have in the past done a lot of stuff with directly focusing on business stuff. So being a business mentor, helping with abundance blocks, even doing strategy, sales. Sales is something I'm very good at. I'm very good at teaching sales as well. But what I like to do now is I really work with the people who are at the forefront of consciousness. Because yes, connecting with these beings, it will give you healing, it will give you abundance. There's all these benefits to it. But for me, it's about the joy and the exploration and the love, the expansion of inner love that happens when you connect. For me, I never connected with the beings because I wanted more abundance. No, I connected with the beings because I wanted to explore who I really am. And I thrive on magic. I mean, that's my thing, you know. I thrive in the magic. I thrive in the synchronicity. I'm here to live the best possible life that I can live. And that's what I teach people to do now. Yes, they can have their businesses. A lot of the people that come to me nowadays already have seven-figure businesses. I don't need to teach them how to make money. They already know how to do that. But they want that level of inner expansion. They want that level of inner frequency just so they can have the most luxurious life that they want to have. And I'm not talking material luxury. I'm talking the luxury of knowing your full dimensional self so that you can be all that you are on this planet. Why take this much of you when you can have it all? Why be only 10% of yourself when you can have it all? And that can be whatever definition it looks like to you. If that means having the house and the car and the partner and the kids, and so be it. But for some people, having it all looks like just knowing, the deepening of that knowing of who we really are as spiritual beings. And that to me is the magic. That's the experience. If I can help people tap into their innermost selves to connect with all of their soul aspects and give them the tools and how they can do that, then the entire world is at your fingertips. The whole world is your oyster. What you choose to do with that, that's up to you. If you want to then build a business, if you want to then create a charity, if you want to rebuild forests, if you want to have a family, do any of those things, but do it with your whole self. Don't do it with just a small limiting part of you. Do it with your whole self. Bring all of your wisdom, all of your ancestry, all of your galactic guides, all of your angelic selves. Bring all of that to the party, and then you tell me what life you want to create, because that to me is where the magic is.
So do I need to know who is supporting me, or is this something that you figure out, like other beings coming through you to support this process? Like, I'm curious. Let me understand a little bit more about that, because I know I'm connected to the Pleiadians, but I'm not connected to the Arcturians, for example. So if I would be your client, are you bringing in the entities, or is it me that is raising my vibration to bring in the entities? Let me understand that.
I can teach you how to access all of that for yourself. So what I do is I teach a process. I teach a process of how to access your inner heart space. And through the inner heart space and through the activation of your light body, you will meet those guides yourself. I'm more of a teacher man to fish kind of person. I don't like to play the messenger. I mean, at the start, I do, like, I will receive the messages. I'll connecting. For example, I had a client session just today where this person's doing a bit of long-term work with me. And so we've been over a few sessions working on helping this person open up their heart space. And today they suddenly saw themselves on a starship, and I saw their higher soul aspect, and I saw how they were dressed. I saw their color. Now, the client didn't pick up on this just yet. It was outside of their conscious awareness. So in some instances, if I see it, I will tell them. But a lot of the time, even their guides will come to me and say, only tell them this piece of information and then let them work it out. Let them figure out the rest. So what I did was I told them the bits that I was told to tell them. And then I've said, okay, I'll see you in 2 weeks. Between now and then, work on this, this, and this, and tell me what you get. So it gives them an opportunity to come into this awakening themselves, instead of me just saying, oh, you have an Arcturian guide or you have a Pleiadian guide. I say, you go into your heart and you tell me who you've met. And then I help them interpret the visuals that they're getting. Like, for example, this client with the starship, she's like, I didn't know what I was seeing. I've never seen this before. What's happening? And so I helped her make sense of it because I've seen a lot of stuff like that before. So I can help her understand. And then I could even say to her, pay attention to this, or look at this aspect of that, or notice this thing that I'm seeing. Because I will often see a little bit more than what they see, right? But then I bring it to their conscious awareness to then expand their vision. And what happens over time, usually by the time a client's work with me for 1 to 2 years, they have everything they need to connect with any of their soul aspects, any of their past lives, any of their records, any of their multidimensional selves, whenever they like. And that to me is giving somebody the ultimate empowerment to access all of who they really are and to bring that to the world. And that's when the fun is just beginning. I mean, that's when we're just starting. Then, because then with that knowledge, what do you do with that? And that's where the fun begins.
Yeah, and this is also like you have all the wisdom. What is your vision? What do you want to create with this?
Well, exactly. And what tends to happen for people, because sometimes when people first start out working with me, they're not clear on that purpose and vision, right? Because they're not connected, they're kind of feeling a bit confused. Or sometimes what happens is maybe they have already built this multi-figure business and, but maybe they're not happy, maybe they're still lacking fulfillment. So when I help them open up to all of these aspects of their own self, that's all we're doing. It's just an exploration of self. There's nothing outside of you. It's an exploration of self, and you're getting more of yourself. So when you have more of you in the equation, well, what can you do with that? Maybe you can find more clarity. And in that clarity, you find purpose, you find fulfillment. And the abundance always just comes. To me, abundance is really, it's a byproduct of just being in alignment, right? When you're in alignment, the abundance is there. I mean, that's, to me, it's a given. And that's why a lot of my clients, they do have a very powerful manifestations, but half the time we don't even focus on money. I mean, these days, in the last year, I haven't even worked on any actual business stuff with my clients. All we've done is energetics, and yet clients are manifesting tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars just by coming into alignment. And so to me, the money is just, it's that providence that comes in as a byproduct of the connection. But when you focus on the connection, what you get is you get to experience your full self. And when you come into life with all of you, then you're actually creating from divine will instead of ego, and you're able to create something that is bigger than yourself. And that's when we get into, entrepreneurs who want to create global impact or beyond global impact. That's the kind of stuff that we start doing when all of these energies come into play.
So what is your big vision? What do you want to create with all your gifts?
I want to teach everyone on the planet who is ready and available to receive it how to bring their full self to play on this planet. And it's really about, it's about reconnecting with our soul aspects. And then added to that is when you discover all of who you are, there's an embracing that happens, right? And when you embrace the galactic beings, there's also an element of the cosmic disclosure side of things, which I'm very big on at the moment too. I know that when we awaken and open our hearts and we remember that we are not alone in this universe, that these beings do exist. They are our friends, they are our family, our star family. And when we reconnect with them, the vision is universal peace, multiversal peace. Because at the moment right now, there's a disconnect on the planet. You only have to read the news to see that, right? A lot of disconnect, and disconnect happens on many levels, macrocosmic, microcosmic, everything's a reflection. So as we open our hearts and we embrace these connections within self, we embrace these connections in the galactic side of things. We open up to the angelic beings. We open up to all these frequencies. And as we connect and bring in that heart connection, what we're really doing is we're bringing about planetary peace. And I think that is something that is so needed right now on the planet. So my big vision, my big mission is to help people reconnect with themselves, reconnect with the galactics, and find harmony and peace as a human race.
Yeah, wow, this is super, super strong. And I think that at the moment we are facing a lot of challenges for humanity. And so that people that are able to bring peace are super, super needed. another question would be like, I can imagine if people are like connected to their heart and very open, are there challenges coming with that? Like, we are already living in a place where we have a lot of challenges, but are there coming other challenges that are different or that were not expected when you are in this kind of state of consciousness?
Being in my heart space itself doesn't come with challenges. It feels very blissful, very light to me. Where there are challenges are in the integration of that with everyday 3D life. And this is where I think the work is. It's not about us ascending to some higher frequency. It's about actually how do we integrate that frequency here on Earth? Because what happens when you have an awakening, but your family is all asleep, then and you suddenly can't relate to your friends anymore, and you feel alone, or you feel like nobody understands you, or you feel like maybe there's you can't accept certain people in your life anymore because their energy feels too low. So what do? This is a very common one. When one person in a family unit awakens and the other one doesn't, it can create conflict. For example, husband, wife, or even with child and parents, because then with open eyes, when you awaken and you open your heart, you see the world in a very different way. And then you see also the people that aren't there yet. And this is probably one of the most challenging journeys of how do you navigate your awakening when other people aren't coming with you? Can you love and respect them enough on their journey to still meet them where they're at and not need them to be how you are? And I see this in a lot of people, creates a lot of conflict, even simple belief systems like, for example, if you've grown up in a very religious family and, your family has gone to church every single Sunday, and I'm not against religion. I'm a huge, huge connector with Christ. I am very, very big on this. But say, for example, as part of your awakening, you no longer feel the need to go to church anymore because you feel like you have that connection within, and you start to see that maybe there's another way to do things, but then your family can't accept that. So then what happens? So it's navigating the 3D elements of this and the emotions and the dynamics between loved ones, family members, close friends. I think there can definitely be challenges in that. I don't know if there's a magic wand that can ever fix that, because people do grow at different rates. But the biggest thing I've learned along my journey is I can be awake and my energy and my light can be so strong that they don't have to bring me down. I can still be in the presence of other people, because I see this in spiritual communities a lot, where they're like, oh, I'm now going to cut out all the toxic people in my life, and they start cutting their family and friends out. I'm like, well, hang on a second. If you're so high vibing, you should be able to maintain that, And I'm not saying to tolerate abuse or anything like that. Like, there are extremes in every scenario. Like, if you're in an abusive relationship, please get out and get help. But if it's just, if, for example, say you've decided to adopt a plant-based diet and you think other people around you are low vibrational because they eat meat, well, that's that might be your perception, and maybe that's what your guides and your energy has showed you. But if you're still in the energy of judgment, then what does that say? It means you still have to integrate. So there's a lot of layers in this, and I think the learning journey just continues to evolve. And the more loving we are, the more open we are, I think that really is the journey that certainly I'm trying to walk. I'm not perfect by any means, but I keep thinking about that if I want to open my heart so much, what do I do with the other people around me? How can I love them? How can I support them? How can I be there for them with my clients, with my friends, with my family, and the people that maybe haven't come to the same realizations that I have? Can I still love them the same way? Or am I expecting them to be like me? Because that can be very unloving sometimes too.
So it's really about walking the talk and being the role model for what you're teaching as for others.
We certainly try.
Yeah, I know.
It's all talk, right? It's all talk. No action.
Yeah.
I'm definitely a woman of action, I can tell you that.
Yeah, so going back a little bit to the mission. So you have a very strong mission, and I see that you support people that also have a strong mission and really want to change this world. can you give us a last sentence about what could happen if all these people would come together and really, yeah, bring together their power and create this amazing world?
I see a vision of a world where when people finally drop the suffering, open their hearts, bring forgiveness and healing to ourselves, to each other and the planet, I see a really beautiful place where we can just enjoy life. Isn't that the beauty of us being here? We've come here to this paradise, and yet we're fighting with each other and we're not looking after each other and we're angry at each other. And yes, there's a beauty in that as well. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all perfect, right? So there's a beauty in everything. But I do see a vision of a world where one day we can let that suffering go. We can let that anger go. We can let those emotions go. And we can fully see one another heart to heart, light to light. And that to me is bliss. Can you imagine walking down the street and just going, wow, I feel that person's light. Wow, I feel that person's light. Wow, I feel that person's light. And everyone's having that experience. And all we're doing is we're just appreciating each other's light, appreciating each other's wholeness, appreciating each other's beingness and presence, and even laughing at our personalities because, hey, some people might be funny and some people might be, I don't know, a bit more serious and, and appreciating, but seeing through the personality, heart to their light, and then just having this little giggle like, ha ha ha, like you're in a female body and you're acting like this and you like pineapples and I like strawberries and you're scared of elephants, but ha ha, that's really funny, Whatever personality quirks and traits that we have, they become embraced instead of something that we judge each other for. That's the world that I see. I see a world where we can still have personality, we can still have different bodies, we can still have different appearances, different physical structures. But at the core, the very core, when we really open our hearts to each other, no matter what kind of personality or what kind of body or what kind of job title or what identity anyone has, we see everybody's light first. And when we can get to that point as a human race, we are going to be living in bliss and enjoying the human experience almost from a laughter, joking kind of perspective. Instead of taking everything so seriously, we just realize that this is the experience and there's a lightness to that. That's the vision that I have.
Wow. Thank you so much. If people are now interested to connect with you, where can they find you? If they are not telepathic, where can they reach out to you? Let us know.
Telepathic does work sometimes. But you can go to my website, www.eeshapatel.com. That's EESHAPATEL.com. And for anyone who's interested, particularly in the galactic and cosmic disclosure side of things, I host a podcast called First Contact. We've had some amazing guests on there, Harvard professors, MUFON experts. There's a really great conversation going on there. And for those who are ready to go to that next level to put theory into practice, I do have some offerings as well. I've got a membership, a monthly membership where you can do all of these activations to help awaken your Arcturian, your Pleiadian, your Sirian, all of your multidimensional connections. And also you can look out for some in-person retreats that I'm running throughout the year as well. So any of those avenues, come connect with me online, join me on the socials, come along to a retreat, check out my activations. I'm here, drop me a DM. So it's just Eesha Patel, EESHAPATEL.com.
Yeah, wow. I will put all the links in the show notes so that it is easy for people to reach out to you. Last but not least, is there anything that you would like to share that I didn't ask you?
The biggest thing I always like to share with people is that you have a choice over your life, right? If there's any one thing that you can take away from this conversation, it's you can listen to this conversation and you can do nothing about it. Or you can listen to this conversation and you can take action to become the best version of you that you are allowed to be. And it's always a choice. We think that there's so many barriers in the way. We think money's in the way. We think that partners are in the way. There's nothing in the way. If you really go into your heart center, you have so much choice and you are already free. That is the freedom. The freedom is within you. The sovereignty is within you. As a human having this human experience and as a spiritual being having this human experience, you get to make choices. So if there's any one thing you can take away from today, it's let this interview change your life. actually take action, do something with the knowledge that you've learned, go out there, find your true self and make the world a better place.
Wow, strong words. Thank you so much for being my guest today. It was a pleasure listening to you and really understanding that there's more out in the galaxy that we can even imagine. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Swanette. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you for listening or watching my podcast, Holistic Creators. If you want to know more about how I can help and support you, have a look at my website, spiritualchangemaker.com. You can also join my Facebook group, Spiritual Changemakers Community. Stay tuned for the next episode by subscribing to this channel. And you also can check the previous episodes.